South America, the fourth largest continent, lying chiefly in the south of the Western Hemisphere, between the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, roughly triangular in shape. We first visited Trinidad. Located just off the tip of Venezuela, Trinidad is the larger and livelier of the twin island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Port of Spain is the capital of Trinidad. The botanical gardens are truly magnificent. French Guiana, Devil's Island. Devil's Island is one of 3 islands which lie off the coast of French Guiana in the South Caribbean Sea. It was first a leper colony, but it became a French penal settlement from 1895 to 1938. It has an area of less than 2 square kilometres, 1 square mile. The staff housing area. The church where both convicts and staff would worship. One of the buildings where the convicts had their cells. Today, it is hard to imagine the horrors bore by Devil's Island. The climate proved so unhealthy that many prisoners died and only a few of the convicts managed to escape. the Federal Republic of Brazil, a country comprising almost half the area of South America. Santarém. The cathedral, which is the oldest building in Santarém, dating back to 1761. No trip to Brazil would be complete without seeing the Brazil nut tree. A rubber tree. The Amazon, the largest river system, the second longest river in the world, the chief river of South America. The length of the Amazon is 4,000 miles. The drainage basin area is 2,250,000 square miles. Cruising down the Amazon is a unique experience. The National Theatre. The view from the stage looking up at the audience. The view of the audience looking down on the stage. The National Theatre Courtyard. The world's largest cashew tree, a genuine fruit whose branches have grown sideways rather than up, resulting in a span larger than a football pitch. The Fort of Magni. The chapel, built inside the Fort of Magni. The Fort of Magni was built on the tip of the peninsula on which Nat Tor stands by the Portuguese to deter the Dutch and the French in the 16th century. It was so named because work began on the fort on Epiphany Day 1598, following victory over a French fleet near the site. No visit to South America is complete without visiting the lighthouse at Salvador. Rio de Janeiro, the main port of Brazil.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep going.
The Monkey's Waterfall. The statue of Christ the Redeemer. The view looking down on Rio de Janeiro. Visa China, the Chinese Pavilion. We next visited this beautiful church, built in 1850. It was now time to relax and visit Rio de Janeiro's beautiful botanical gardens. Uruguay, one of the smallest countries in South America. Step aboard for a train ride. In response to an increasing need for a concrete contribution to recover Uruguay's historical and cultural past, the local association of rail friends have rebuilt this steam railway system. This is the state that the coaches were originally in. The coaches after restoration. We were now fortunate to be able to visit the Uruguayan Parliament building with its beautiful artwork. The Uruguayans are justifiably proud of their Parliament building. All the artwork has been produced by local artists. The soldiers are employed to guard the written constitution of Uruguay. We were led out of the bustling capital to the beautiful Paraba River Delta. This giant delta covers an area larger than the Netherlands. As we glide along, we capture glimpses of elegant riverside villas, Victorian docks and colourful manicured gardens. This area is described as the Venice of the South. Patagonia, a geographical area of South America in Argentina and Chile. It consists chiefly of an arid plateau rising to the Andes. Sheep raising is the principal economic activity. The vegetation is similar to desert regions. The coastal areas are populated by large seal colonies. The Falkland Islands, an island group and British Crown colony in the South Atlantic Ocean. The population is almost entirely of British origin. The Falkland Islands has an area of 4,700 square miles and a population of about 3,000. Stanley is the capital. The Whalebone Arch. The War Memorial. The Governor's House. After leaving Stanley, it was time to drive through the barren landscape of the islands. We next visited Long Island Farm. This was a unique opportunity to see how farmers live and work in the Falklands. We were first given a demonstration on the correct way to dig peat. The peat is stored here to dry. The Watson family has worked this 22,000-acre sheep farm for 6 generations and still use completely traditional Falkland-style methods. We were now allowed to witness a sheep shearing demonstration producing genuine Falkland wool, one of the world's finest. We now ventured into the world's southernmost national park. We travelled in trains that had been modelled on earlier prison trains. The train stopped here so as we could get out and view this beautiful waterfall. After seeing the waterfall, we continued on our train journey, viewing the devastation caused by the logging industry. It was now time to discover more of the wilderness of glacier lakes, Andean mountains and beautiful forests. This is the southernmost point of land, the next land being Antarctica. the world's southernmost post office. Cape Horn, halfway around South America. This is where the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean meet. Cape Horn Island. It was now time to relax and sail through the magnificent Chilean forts. We next visited the Andean Club, a unique ski centre being one of the very few in the world with a view of the ocean. We took the ski lift up to the top of the ski slope and hiked down. Potri, one of the highest towns in the world. Here it is very difficult to breathe. In the Narcar Desert of Peru, a mysterious series of ancient carvings stretch like a giant map or blueprint across the high, arid plains, known as the Marca Lines, and designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. They are an enigma. No one has proof of who built them or why. Since their discovery, they have inspired fantastic explanations. It is tended to believe they were created between 400 and 650 AD by the Narcar culture. A unique flight on a high-winged aircraft over the desert allows one to truly appreciate this amazing phenomena from the air. The Huaycar El Drag. This imposing structure, like a pyramid made of giant blocks, dates back to the Huaycar times around 1000 BC. Its many facades display intricate, cartoon-like carvings, some of the best preserved of their kind. The entrance, the main square of the citadel of Chan Chan. The citadel of Chan Chan, the ancient capital of the Qinyu Emperor, built around the 13th century, is the largest adobe city in the world, preserved thanks to the arid weather conditions of the region. The ruins consist of 9 great compounds. The Emperor's Throne. This is where the citadel's water supply came from. The burial chamber. If one looks closely, one can see an image of the Emperor. The first place we visited was one of the city's main squares, where the iguanas roam freely. The gleaming white cathedral, a neo-Gothic confection of spires, arches and tall pointy windows. Simon Bolivar, 1783 to 1830, South American soldier and statesman known as the Liberator. The cream-coloured Moorish clock tower, decorated with Islamic geometrical designs at its base and long Arab-style windows around the column. The main government buildings. The Old Town.
as you see, the form of the shell of these animals bring the name of the Galapagos Islands. Yeah, Galapagos means saddleback. It's a type of saddleback from Spain. So the first Spanish people who comes here started to see this type of saddleback or shell, and they start to call this Galapagos, and then we have the name of Galapagos now. But not all the giant tortoises have this form, okay? So in Galapagos, something interesting is that we have many different species of an animal. For example, this one have 11 different species. However, we see them be very similar. They are different, completely different. They could reproduce each other or mate each other, have families. They could come here floating by the currents, by the presence of currents we have in Galapagos. So we are supposed there was a pregnant, female or many pregnant females who could get in the water because the currents, as I said sometimes there are strong rains, and they could come from Chile, from Chile to Galapagos by the Humboldt current.
The Humboldt current.
Because the ancestor of this animal is not present anymore. He's not alive anymore.
So
it is extinct. But we know
only here.
Yeah, but we know that the ancestor of this came from Chile.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and when they get over this island, they started to spread it out everywhere, and different islands, they colonized the islands, and they started to become different. Okay, different species, evolving. Yeah.
About how old are these? I mean, there's some big ones and some small ones.
Yeah, guys. Talking about how big they are. We can't say exactly age, but we can have an idea of this guy. For example, it could have 10, 15 years. It's a teenager now, okay? Yeah. It is 19 years. So how long they could live, that's another question that we have, and it's very famous. Sometimes people think that they could get 200 years, but in fact, in Galapagos, the oldest giant tortoise was found was 160 years. Yeah, 160 years. It could be even more, it could be even pretty less, but that's the oldest giant tortoise
They do save their energy, don't they?
To break a rule, for example, break a rule. Yeah, people are now in love for the space we have. We now know this is very special place, and this is very good. Yeah, the education is very important in Galapagos.
After listening to that very interesting commentary, it was now time to see the breeding programme. The Galapagos Islands have park status. It was now time to take a boat trip round the islands. The Panama Canal, a canal across the Isthmus of Panama connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The Panama Canal is 51 miles long. The canal was opened in 1940. These vehicles are referred to as mules. Originally, mules used to undertake the task of pulling the ships along the canal. The Panama Canal consists of 3 locks. On leaving the final lock, we entered the Atlantic Ocean. Our trip circling South America had now been completed.